Hello, hello.
Hello.
Brace yourselves, guys, because I'm about to go full-on history nerd.
Oh,
Are you
don't do that.
excited?
So excited.
So we are somewhere very, very special, somewhere that I've been wanting to bring Laurent to for a while. We are at the Basilique Saint Denis, and this is just shamefully overlooked monument in Paris, I think, because this is sort of like the Westminster Abbey of Paris. This is where all the kings and queens of France are buried, or at least the important ones. So we're gonna go full-on history nerd. Are you ready to hear some
Is
stories?
Henry IV buried here?
I don't know, actually.
We should check
We
because
need to find that out.
he was the best one.
Yeah, all the best people are from Po.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's two.
So let's head inside, and
Yeah.
are you ready to hear some stories about some dead people?
Yeah, okay. Let's do that. And we are talking about stories about dead people in front of funeral services.
We're very on theme.
Yeah, very.
Also, speaking of on theme for France, if you guys can hear the airplanes, there are airplanes flying all over the sky right now, practicing for the Bastille Day celebrations, the 14th of July. I guess this is their practice zone. Speaking of the 14th of July, I don't know what the stage is for, but I'm wondering if it's for something like that.
That's also the Fête de la Musique.
Oh yeah, there's the Fête de la Musique. So the Fête de la Musique is the 21st of June,
Yeah, and
which is tomorrow.
It was created like maybe 30 or 40 years ago by a culture minister.
Yeah,
And it was to promote amateur music.
live music.
Live music, but
So
like
all
not in a
over
professional
France.
way, on amateur way.
Yeah.
So it's like kind of a way for amateur bands or musicians to be able to perform.
So everywhere there's
yeah.
just live music, like every restaurant, all on the street, there's live music everywhere. And so I wonder if something's going to be happening here.
Probably.
Someone's a little warm, aren't we?
No, there was like a shower, like a thing.
Oh, I
that-
thought it was just you
No,
sweating.
No, it's not me sweating. It's just that that's like an outdoor. But-
Soon it will be you sweating.
Yeah, soon.
As we're going in, I do want to clarify. I said that this is sort of the Westminster Abbey of France, and it is because of all the rulers, the monarchs that are buried here. However, it is not the traditional place that the kings of France are crowned. So Westminster Abbey, you have the burials, the tombs, and you also have the coronations there. But here you have the burials, and for France, you have Reims, or how do you say it?
Nice.
Wow. It's about an hour to the east of Paris, and the cathedral at Reims is where the kings of France are traditionally crowned.
Except for Henry IV, that was crowned in Chartres.
There's actually like 5 of them that weren't crowned in wow. Nope, I totally just looked this up, and there were actually only 2 kings that were not crowned in Reims. The first was Louis VI, the second was Henry IV.
Yeah.
But a big part of the Joan of Arc story is that Joan of Arc was the one that led the military campaign that allowed them to recapture Reims from the English and actually crown Charles VII, which was a big deal because before he was crowned, he wasn't technically the king.
It's at this moment I realized that I was in trouble, and I was going to spend a very history nerdy afternoon.
Saint Denis Basilica, or technically the Basilique Cathédrale de Saint Denis, is just north of Paris. You can reach it on the line 13 with your Metro card. And it is an immensely important building, not just because of the burials here, but because of the architecture. This was widely acknowledged as the first building that used all of the elements of Gothic architecture and has been the inspiration for many other famous and historical sites around France. In the 5th century, this site was a Gallo-Roman cemetery, but the land was purchased by Saint Geneviève, who built a chapel dedicated to Saint Denis here. In 636, King Dagobert I, we'll come back to him later, brought the relics of Saint Denis, the patron saint of France, here and interred them in the basilica. A few hundred years later, in the 12th century, the abbot Suger built up what we see today as the Gothic cathedral, finishing work in 1166. But let's flash back to the 7th century and King Dagobert again. I told you we were coming back to him because his tomb was the first one to be placed inside this basilica. In fact, here it is, right here. It's a little bit hidden. You have to stand kind of behind the main altar area on the left and then look across to be able to get a good view of this tomb. But you can see that it is one of the most special tombs in this building. It is very elaborate, very beautifully carved. And at the bottom you can see the man himself, Dagobert, although we don't know how accurate a depiction this is, as it was carved several centuries after his death. What did you find?
Inspiration for the tiles in the bathroom.
Oh yeah, we do need tile inspiration. What should our theme be?
Goat.
Our theme should be goat.
And the cows.
So you want goat and cow bathroom?
Yeah.
Alright, it's the first part of the day where I'm nerding out a little bit because I actually didn't know that this king was buried here. And this is the OG, the man that united what we know today as France. It's Clovis, and I'm standing right next to him. Clovis was born in 466 and was the first king of France to unite the Franks and much of Gaul from 41 to 511. This was a very important time because it was the time when the Roman Empire was transforming into what is now Europe. He was a member of the Merovingian dynasty, which survived and became very powerful for more than 200 years. Before Clovis, the Franks were all divided into small groups under small petty kings. Clovis united them to be led underneath one leadership, which set the groundwork for what we know today as France. Also, every time I see a depiction of his coronation, it looks insane. What happened? What happened, Clovis?
There's a lion.
There's a very sad lion.
It's a weird one. Some sculptor never had seen lion before doing it.
Maybe he'd just seen lions that were really, really depressed. So these stone effigies are called gisons. Gisons in French. And basically it's the representation of someone. Earlier they were quite idealized. Later on they became a little bit more realistic. And they are supposed to be not dead, but waiting for the resurrection, waiting for the end of the world where they'll be brought back to life and ascend into heaven. A lot of them have very sad lions or dogs or other animals at their feet, and this is meant to represent like loyalty, fidelity, and it's sort of the same idea as when the Egyptians were buried with items inside the tombs with them for them to take into the afterlife.
Yeah, originally in the 13th century they were painted with very flashy colors, and of course with the time the color flashed away, went away. But there's some that are there that still have some blue painting.
So I've just spotted another person that I'm really nerding out about. Right behind me, this is Blanch de France. She was the Queen of France, and she was the mother of someone you may have heard of, Saint Louis, the king who was so holy he became a saint. And Blanche de France is so interesting because her grandmother or great-grandmother, I'm going to check that, I'm going to put it on the screen right here, can't remember which one, was Eleanor of Aquitaine. And Eleanor of Aquitaine basically went down to Spain to see her grand/great-granddaughters, and choose which one she would bring back to become the Queen of France, to marry the King of France and become queen. And she chose Blanche, even though Blanche was not the oldest or the first in line. She saw something in Blanche that she thought would be a good quality in a queen, and it turns out she was definitely right, because Blanche was a young widow. Her husband, the king, died quite early, and she had to see Saint Louis, the future Saint Louis, through his minority, which meant, and basically she ended up ruling the kingdom while he was too young to do so. She did a great job. She kept the monarchy intact, which is not easy to do when you have basically a small child that you're saying, this is the king, everyone respect him. And she became one of the fiercest female rulers of France. We've crossed over to the other side of the basilique to show you guys someone that I think is incredibly interesting. I know I'm going to say that about every single person I feature in this video, but this is Charles VI. Actually, that's his wife. There he is on the far side. Hard to film, Charles VI. Also hard to maintain as a king, because he had a lot of mental health problems. He was known for having these fits where he would just run mad. He would attack anyone around him. He wouldn't seem to know his own family. He also at one point believed that he was made out of glass, and if anyone touched him, he would shatter into a million pieces, which was obviously complicated when you're the king and everyone's kind of depending on you to hold the kingdom together. By 1407, his younger brother, Louis d'Orléans, had taken over as sort of the unofficial regent of the kingdom when it became clear that Charles wasn't a reliable monarch. And fortunately, that did not last too long, because from 1407, Louis d'Orléans was murdered in the Rue Vieille du Temple in central Paris. And there's a really fantastic book, I'm going to put it up on the screen here, that talks all about his murder and how detective work, as we know it today, was basically invented to solve his murder. Charles VI, nicknamed the Beloved, was born in 1368 and was King of France from 1380 until his death in 1422. You might know him from, for example, the Shakespeare play Henry V. He was the king that Henry was fighting against when he did his campaigns in France. Maybe it makes Henry's victories seem slightly less impressive if you think about the fact that Charles VI was plagued with mental illness and psychotic episodes. An interesting fact that I was very interested to find out, because I'm a big Edgar Allan Poe fan, is that the story that Edgar Allan Poe wrote called Hop Frog, if you have not read it, I strongly recommend it. It is super weird, but very entertaining and apparently true. The story concerns a court jester, in order to get revenge on the nobles that had mocked him, convinces them to dress up as gorillas for a masked ball, and then lights them on fire. And apparently this did actually happen. There was a group of nobles, including Charles VI, who dressed up as gorillas, and during a masked ball, their costumes caught on fire. Whether this was an assassination attempt, we don't know. It could have been, but it was never proven. I'd like to also talk about how this haircut was the very trendy go-to thing in the 15th century, and it is now making a comeback. I have seen people recently with this haircut. No. There's many things from history that would be cool to bring back, but not this. I'd like to say also that Laurent got a haircut this morning. Doesn't he look good? Yes. And at one point I walked into the barber shop while he was already in the chair getting his hair wet, and something about how they had combed his hair, I thought he was getting that haircut, and my life passed before my eyes. Yeah. You think you could pull off the bowl cut?
Yeah.
Yeah. Behind me now is one of, no, I'm gonna be bold, my favorite tomb in this whole place, because it is stunningly gorgeous. I'm gonna stop talking and just show you. It is so beautiful. This is the tomb of King Francis I. You might know him from the series The Serpent Queen, a series about Katherine de Medici, who we're going to come back to in just a minute. You might also know him from The Tudors. He is depicted in The Tudors when King Henry VIII goes from England to France, and they have the Cloth of Gold meeting, the Field of the Cloth of Gold. That is King Francis I. He is also known for shipping off his 2 sons to Spain as hostages while they were still children, potentially emotionally scarring them for life. Francis I was born in 1494, and was king from 1515 until 1547. He's sort of the quintessential French Renaissance king, and France really bloomed under his rule. There's so much art, there's so much culture that was brought in, both under his rule and under the rule of his son, Henry II. And what else would you expect from a king who was close personal friends with Leonardo da Vinci and became a sort of surrogate father figure for the king? The two were so close. In fact, there's a really sweet story about how when Francis I heard that da Vinci was dying, he rushed to be at his friend's bedside before he passed away. However, in reality, this is not true. Unfortunately, Francis was miles and miles away and couldn't make it in time, but it shows the closeness of their relationship and the influence that da Vinci would have had on Francis. This is also the first tomb, chronologically, in the Basilique Saint Denis that begins to show more realistic figures instead of the idolized gisons of the other earlier tombs. Right behind me is one of the most controversial and I might even say notorious figures in French history. It is the Queen Katherine de Medici, and she's someone that absolutely fascinates me for many reasons, but she had an incredible life. It's so many twists and turns. It's so dramatic. There have been multiple series and movies that portray her. She was sent over from Italy to marry the young Henry II, who at the time was not the heir presumptive to the throne. He was never really meant to be king, but his older brother died, making him the king, and very shortly she became Queen of France very unexpectedly. She had many children, although for the first almost 10 years of their marriage, they were unable to conceive. She managed to stay without their marriage getting annulled, which happened quite often in those days if you couldn't produce a child. But finally, they were able to start having children, and they had loads. So many that, in fact, 3 of her sons successively became kings of France. Unfortunately, they all died without an heir, and by the end of her life, she had seen Henry IV, who was not from her royal Valois line, but from the Bourbon line, come along and start the new Bourbon dynasty.
That was nerdy.
I told you today was going to be extra nerdy.
Yeah,
I did warn you. I think what might be scaring you a little bit on the nerd scale is that I'm doing all of these presentations from memory, and I haven't actually looked up anything. This is all just floating around in my head all the time.
Such a big nerd.
All right, guys, this is where I'm just going to nerd out because I love the period of the reign of Henry II. It is such a juicy period. If you are interested in history, there are so many big, important figures on the scene. You got Henry II. You've got Catherine de Medici, who was the queen that really, apart from many other notorious things, changed France forever by bringing Italian culture into France, creating what we have today as French cuisine. A lot of French culture came from Italy with her. You've got La Reine Margot, their daughter Margaret, known as Queen Margot, who later married Henry IV, and at their wedding protected him from assassination during the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, deeply influencing the future of France, because if he'd been killed, he would not have gone on to become the greatest king of France. Debatable, but for Laurent's sake, let's say the greatest king. Also at their court, you would have had Mary, Queen of Scots, a historical figure I am fascinated with because she was married to their son, Francis, and not many people remember this, she was the Queen of France for a short time. After Henry II's death, she became the Queen of France with her husband, Francis, who unfortunately died about a year later, and then she went back to Scotland and things didn't go great. The lions aren't the only ones who are depressed. We're heading back down into the crypt, and Laurent doesn't know it yet, but his life is about to be filled with bitter disappointment. Who is next to you? It's Henry IV, born in Pau, Laurent's hometown.
Great beard.
And to be honest, we're not just being Poe biased here. Henry IV is often acknowledged as one of the best, if not the best, king of France. Unfortunately, this is all we're going to see of him today.
Yeah, there's no monuments.
No. Ooh, it is dark down here. So after the tomb for Henry II and Catherine de Medici, No more grand tombs were constructed in this basilica. Even Louis XIV, the Sun King, did not have a grand tomb constructed here. He preferred to spend the money on his campaigns and projects during his lifetime rather than a memorial to himself after his death. So the entire Bourbon line is not really represented in the monuments in this basilique, but you can see little traces of them. Unfortunately, Henry IV is not one of the ones you can see a little trace of, because during the Revolution, his body was put on display and people took, let's say, souvenirs. The Revolution got really grim, guys, like really grim. So there literally is nothing left. He doesn't even have a burial site in this basilica. While we're down in the crypt, we have to visit the end of the story, the end of the Kings of France, as well as the beginning. Because something that's really striking down here is that you have the Bourbon coffins, Bourbon tombs here. You have Louis XVIII, who was the younger brother of Louis XVI, just behind him there, and the brother-in-law of Marie Antoinette, who is just there. But if you turn around, right across from them is the archaeological crypt, and this is the graves and tombs from the very first chapel that was ever in this site. So they are the oldest things in this site. During the Revolution, many of the tombs in this basilica were damaged or destroyed, and the bones were later collected and placed down here in the crypt. So if you want to see the greatest concentration of actual burials of rulers, their spouses, their children, and their relatives, the best place is to come down here into the crypt and see where their bones actually reside. As we were walking out, just as we were exiting the building, we noticed one last tomb that I had never seen before. It was Louis d'Orléans, the younger brother of Charles VI, who was murdered in 1407. And I fangirled hard, guys. I was very excited. This has been so much fun.
Yeah, it was very interesting.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how nerdy am I to you now?
Like 11.
But you were very good, and you learned some stuff. You enjoyed.
Yeah, it was interesting.
I mean, honestly, I was just saying that you know that thing when people go to LA and they take the tour where they drive in front of celebrities' houses. Like, this is that for me. These are the celebrities. I'm like, oh. I mean, it's so much fun every time I come here. I've only been a couple of times actually, yeah. But every time I come here, I just have the greatest time. Anyway, we're gonna head on because you have to get to the opera because you have a show tonight, and I have to go home and organize things because we're heading out, hitting the road tomorrow, off on adventures. So we're gonna say goodbye, but before we do, we're just gonna say, please do subscribe and like this video if you enjoyed this. If you want to see more like history nerd time, I mean, let's be honest, you're going to have to. If you're following this channel, you're going to get some of this from time to time. But if you liked it, please do give a thumbs up to this channel and to this video. And a big thank you to our patrons, of course, because you guys are so great. We so much appreciate your support, and it means the world to us that people are invested in, you know, when we do little fun things like this, but also the work that we're doing at Everdeen, the renovations, everything that's happening over there. So thank you so much, patrons. And with that, it's off to the races, and we will see you guys next time. Sad dog.